All right, welcome to World History. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this little video that I'm going to drop into your Google Classroom, or at least a link from the YouTube channel. That should help out a little bit. And then what you can do is open up another window and have your work document at the same time. So that way you can do the document, do your note set, and follow the video at the same time. I'm in the picture. Oh, hello. I don't know, you can always put a post-it note over top of it if you don't want to see me, but I thought this would be a little bit better for people who want to, kind of get back to the normalcy, hear my voice, see my face. And yes, by the way, I know I have a slight allergy thing with some material that I work with at home that's bugging me right now. So yeah, I know my eye looks a little funky. So other than to be a pirate, that's what you're going to get anyway. So here we go. I don't plan on these things taking very long. You do still have to turn them in. If you ever need to go back and watch the video or watch the PowerPoint or anything at all, then I mean, you can easily do that. So that's the same thing as you would have in a classroom. We're just not in the classroom. So anyways, without further ado, here we go. So we are talking about the Romans again. Still will be for a while. That's at least the idea, is that we'll talk about it for a while. And I have a little arrow thing flying around. That's kind of fun. A little comment. All right, enough with the games. So we are now at the point where Rome has built itself up, and we are going to try to do something with it. So the idea is that we're building up a government here. So you have two types of people here, and you could say it's kind of similar to Republicans and Democrats, but we're not going to go there. We're just going to say patricians and plebeians. Some say plebeians, but I'm not that fancy. I'm going to just say plebeians. So you see that they have patricians and plebeians in the different, I really thought they could have gone with different colors, like light purple and purple, but some are like blue, I don't know, whatever. They got like red and yellow or whatever you want to do. But anyways, consuls up top, senators, tribunes, and then down below citizen assembly. So that's what we're going to talk about. So the first thing is you got this group called the patrician class. Now, how do you know which one goes first? I always remember PA is before PL. So the patricians would be first. They're your wealthy landowners in Rome's ruling class originally. So they are what we would consider to be the richy riches of Rome. The plebeians, though, they are I would say lower class people, but they're the middle class people. They would be your shopkeepers, it would be your artisans, and they would be your farmers. So you know what an artisan is by chance? Anybody? An artisan is someone who makes things. So like an artiste, an artist of some fashion. They make something. So you have these two groups. You have your patricians over here. You have your like plebeians down here in the other two parts. And that's what the divide is for Rome. So both of these groups were citizens. They could vote. They could pay taxes, and they both could serve in the military. Now, for the most part, the military service is going to be from your plebeian class and not so much the patrician class. Now, they could not marry a different class. And this is where it's really, really sad. Because if you were this, little rich patrician lady and you loved your plebeian man, you could never marry against the rules, well, because you're not mixing the two classes here. So very similar to the story of Romeo and Juliet. We'll get to that in the Middle Ages and not right now. And that ends pretty badly too if you know anything about Romeo and Juliet. So anywho, moving on. The plebeians also early on could not hold political office. So that's obviously going to be a bias against them in terms of wealth because they are not allowed to participate, which kind of stinks if you're someone who could be a really good politician, but you're not allowed to because the rules of Rome say no. So they could not hold political office. So we're going to build on this later with your plebeian and patrician class. So your patricians, if I can say that word right, this is part of what you call a three-part government. Three-part government. You can see that I've got the American three branches of government here because, I don't know, really. I just put the picture. No, just kidding. It's very similar to what we will have very shortly. So they have what's called a tripartite system. Tripartite means three parts, as you can see up above. Executive, legislative, and judicial. That makes up the U.S. And essentially, Rome has the same thing, a tripartite three-part system. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at these three, what we call the three groups. Now, obviously, they're going to be legislative, executive, and judicial branches. But group one, where they made laws. Easy way to remember it, legislative is the L in legislative means the L for making laws, and that's what they do. That's what their job was. Group 2 would run the government. That's where we get the executive branch from. The root word of executive is execute, which does not mean to kill, but instead to carry out an order. And so they run the government. And the third group act as judges, and that would be the judicial branch. Correct. Pretty easy to remember that one. So they also had what was called a check and balance system. Now, this is done, and it's a phrase that we use today, because you need to make sure that the three branches are all doing what they are supposed to do. When they overlap each other, that's a problem. When they butt in and try to take over the other one, I'm trying to do that with fingers, but that's a problem. So they have to know what kind of framework that they are to work in, and each one has that framework. But you got to check to make sure the other groups are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you got to balance that power out. That's the idea. That's why it's called a check and a balance. Otherwise, no one's checking and no one's balancing anything. So that means it's out of whack. So checks and balances are a good thing, and that's what we have in our executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branches as well. That each one of these checks each other out. So a good example would be the Supreme Court. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, the president can put up somebody for a nomination to be checked by Congress and to be approved. And then once that approval is done, boom, that person goes on to be in the judicial branch. And that can work several different ways. When the legislature makes the laws, the president is the last one to sign off on it before a bill becomes a law, but the judicial branch also has a job. They have to make sure that any new laws are constitutional within the bounds of the Constitution. So checks and balances are actually a really good thing. So in the Roman version, your very top officials were called consuls, not council, that's a different thing. Consuls. Consuls would be like their version of what would be a president, essentially. Perhaps not without the same powers that our president would have, but a consul was leading their group. And they were chosen every year from the patrician class. The richy riches got to choose these people. And their job is that they ran the army and the government. So oftentimes you'd have two consuls. And we said that was very similar to what Sparta would have. You'd have a village chief, and you would have a war chief. And those two should work well together, but they don't always necessarily have to overlap. And they're chosen every year. So why is this bad? Well, because if you have a good consul, then you only get 1 year to serve. I just say good. The good consul, you only have 1 year to serve. If you're a bad one, well, they're only serving 1 year too. So the idea is you get 1 year to do as much as you can and to help make Rome great. Because I would say in class that you want songs sung in your honor and poems written about how great you are, and you only have 1 year to get that stuff done. Otherwise, it goes back all over again. Now, one power that they did have, and this should be familiar to you, is they had the power of veto. Veto means I forbid in Latin. In other words, they were able to say no to anything that came across their plate that they did not think was proper, and we still have this right as governors and presidents today. Say a new law comes in, goes to the president's desk, and they want it to go from a bill to a law. As I said, the president's the last person to sign off on it. And the president says, nope, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to veto this law. They would go back to the congressional branch, and it would start all over again, legislative branch. And it would start all over again. But that way they have the power to forbid anything they think might harm their country or their government and just get rid of it. But at the same time, we'll talk next year about how you can actually have a 2/3 majority and overrule what the president basically did, kind of as a backdoor for laws to come in. But the veto power is still pretty important, and we do have this in our state and national governments today. And you had very little risk of power abuse due to the short reign. So it's not a dictatorship, that's different. You only have 1 year, and then they're out. So again, hard to abuse that power when you have only 365 days to get things done. The praetors, this was your judicial side of things. Praetors, I know it's weird, it's got the AE thing, you're not used to that, you're like, praetors? They interpreted the law and they act as judges. And like I said, that's exactly what our Supreme Court does today, is they act as judges, they listen to cases, and they interpret what the law actually is. Whether it abides by the foundations and the borders of the Constitution. That's the job of the praetors. And then your Senate, your lawmaking branch. So again, you had consuls, executive, president, praetors, judicial, Supreme Court, Senate, like our Senate that we have in the legislative branch today, and also Congress on the other, well, Congress as a whole, but House of Representatives on the other side. But Senate was a lawmaking branch, 300 patricians serving for life. There's a couple problems with that. Number one, you've got the patricians. Again, that's your wealthier class, so you're only getting one perspective and bias. And second thing is they're serving for life. So that's can be problematic when you have bad people in there, is that they're in there for life and you're kind of stuck with them. The number 300, not so far off from what we have today. You have, anybody know how many senators we have? How many senators? Anybody? We have 100 senators, 2 per state, times 50 equals 100. Anybody know how many's in the House of Representatives? Anybody? Always 435. So total of 535 people in just our government in the United States. 300 is not so far off. Again, a lot of voices, but Rome's pretty big and you want to have a lot of voices in there. And so that's what you would have. The job of Senate, same thing as they would do today. They would propose laws, they would hold debates. They would debate on things within the country and things that are coming up. So if this sounded very familiar at all to you and say, oh, this is like the US, well, you're on the right track, because that's exactly where we get these ideas from. So we got to make things even, though, across the board, because as was said at the beginning, that it's only the patricians, the richy riches, are the only ones who get to have any kind of say. So here you have this bigger social class of the plebeians, who are your middle to lower class people who want to have some kind of a say in this government also. So in 494 BC, the plebeians went on strike and they set up their own republic. Now, I mean, I would probably ask a question about strikes in class and what is that? Well, a strike means it's a refusal to work. So if this is your group that does your farming, they're your blue collar workers. They do really all the work that the fancy pants don't want to do. If they go on strike, well, that's really going to hit the patricians hard, because they count on these plebeians to do the work. So instead, they go on strike and they set up their own republic. And by 287 BC, all citizens end up having equal standing. So the plebeians did work. Now, they didn't strike all 100 some odd of those years, but it eventually wore the patricians down. And so by 287 BC, you're getting Rome to where it should be, that all citizens have equal say and equal standing, and they become a more representative democracy. There you go. So I will include that video that's down below there. I won't click on it now because the sound doesn't always transfer well over when we do them on here. So you need to make sure you answer questions. That's what I'm going to ask you tomorrow on your Zoom. So remember, you got to check in every day. We got to take attendance, and then we'll talk, and then I'll send you on your merry way. I won't ever keep it for the whole period. Just on Zoom. I'll stick around, though, in case people have questions. You can bounce back on. You can ask me about things, and then we can sort them out. But anyways, that's it. Didn't take too long, 13 minutes, a little bit shorter than the 8th graders did. But double check, make sure you've got your stuff done and in, and God forbid, if you need something else to do, you can always start working on your dumb-down sheet. Even if you say, I don't know where the words are, they are on Quizlet. Look up the Quizlet and you can find them on there. So until next time, I'll see you.